Cheers. I hope everyone's had a good day and a good evening. So let me start by introducing myself. My name is Rebecca Page Tickell, and I am an academic at University of East London. I work in the Royal Docks School of Business and Law, and I'm a business psychologist and also an HR practitioner. And so I've been working in business psychology and HR for a number of years. And about 10, 11 years ago, I moved from kind of being in practice. So I was working in consulting, working in blue chip firms, um, a lot of organization development, management development, leadership development, um, performance management, those kind of areas I was working in. And I moved into academia. And so one of the things that for me is of real interest is how does this world of work work? You know, what is it that makes work happen? What is it in organizations that make things work well? And what's going to be changing for us in the future of work? And I have two main research areas really at the moment. One of them is around understanding the gig economy. So that's understanding that world in which people don't go to an employment status, but instead they do individual tasks. And it may be that many of you are giggers, and that would be really interesting to hear your perspective on the things that I'm saying. Um, and then the second area really is it's around justice in the workplace, but from the perspective of conflict. So understanding conflict and mediation, and understanding how we can use those to support people really developing and enhancing their skills in managing conflict, but managing themselves, managing the workplace, so that we have a restorative workplace. So a workplace that is genuinely good to be in, where we're not using people for their individual specific skills, but actually we're recognizing the personhood of people. So do very kind of opposite things there, kind of gig economy where people are widgets, a little task to do, and we're really not interested in them. And then also where people are recognized as persons, the personhood of people is really important. So tonight, I want to think about how particularly the gig economy impacts the workplace. I want to think about boundaries within organizations and expectations between individuals and between organizations, but in terms of the future of the workplace. And I want to look a little bit tonight at thinking about this COVID crisis and what it means for the world of work and for all of us, really. So let me just share my screen with you. Okay, so I so apologize that I am not doing this as well as I could. Okay. Camille, could you show me what I'm doing wrong, please? Because I'm obviously doing something wrong. Because I'm not sharing my screen. You can see me. Can you see the slides though, Camille? Oh, you can see the slides. I can only see myself and I really want to see the slides. That's where it is. Okay. All right. Okay. So I hope you can all see. Could you put your hand up if you can see slide saying future of the workplace, shifting boundaries and expectations? Let's see if people put their hands up. Thank you, Amira. Appreciate that. Good. So okay, right, let's see if this will work. Hmm? Apologies for this. Can you still see my screen? You can still see me, but you can't see my screen. All right, there we go, got it. Now what I need to be able to do is go down to the next one. We were trying to sort this out earlier on, and we found that it was actually on, so apologies that it is glitchy. I think one of the things that's happening in the UK, and I'm sure in lots of places, is that because everyone's online, bandwidth is really struggling quite a bit more. Right, so here we go. Let me move this over to here. Right, okay, so can you see Gameplan? Camille, can you tell me if you can see Gameplan so that I can see if I've moved on to the next one? Yes, so can I ask you guys to put your hands up if, can you not see me anymore? Okay, is that better, Camille? Okay. Right, okay, good. So what, if we can get there, what I want to talk about is, first of all, the direction of travel. Then I want to talk about the barriers and drivers for the change. So what's the future going to look like? And actually, what are the things that are forcing that to happen? And what are the things that are impeding it? What do we know about the gig economy within all of this? And what do we know about the impact also then of the coronavirus? So let's start off by thinking about the direction of travel in the future of the workplace. Now, some of you may well have seen this work before, and this is work from PricewaterhouseCoopers. And a few years ago, they, and really to be honest with you, a number of the different consultancies were looking to understand what is the world of work going to be like in 2030. So they're heading for 2030 and kind of thinking about, well, what's it going to be like there? I did a fair amount of research, and you'll see at the bottom, just down there, I've put the link. So if this is interesting to you, please go to the link and read over this. There's a lot of work behind this, but they came up with a relatively simple outcome, which was they think that there are 4 possible futures that could emerge, which are all kind of driving and competing with one another. And to me, I think each of these futures is quite likely, but in different geographical locations. And I'd find it interesting to discuss that with you. So first of all, if we look at the blue, so the blue world is the corporate world. And in the corporate world, what they're really saying is the corporate institutions, those institutions which are generally larger than the nation state, those have won out. They actually dominate everything. So think about Google, think about Facebook, think about some of those huge organizations like the banks, the health service, the insurance companies, perhaps some travel organizations, those big corporate animals. And imagine the metaphor here really is a huge tower block, steel glass tower block. For an employee, when you come in the ground floor, you're in, you're safe, you're protected. And in particular, life is quite structured and secure. And it's all about talent management, it's all about succession planning, and it's all about security, stability as people go up the ladder. So clearly, the thing in the corporate world is, are you in or are you out? If you're in, perfect, you really won, great, well done, you won. But if you're out, you lost. Now, that's gone back to, let me just go back to the previous one. Okay, good. So if you're out of the corporate world, you lost, and there is nearly nothing for you. So this is all about getting in. Once you're in, you're fine. But if you can't get in, you're stuffed. When you're in, it's about slow, steady progress, predictability, and gentle competition between the corporations as things move very slowly. So this is very mature, very slow moving, very stable, kind of, I think very much in terms of Germany for this, that very secure, socially available environment. So that's the blue world. Then we have the red world. Now, the red world is much more like the gig economy. Fast, fast, fast. It's all about the best new idea, it's innovation. Whereas in the corporate world, it's all about status. Here, it's all about ideas. And it's all about having the new thing. It's very unpredictable. Red, because it's red in tooth and claw. Highly competitive. Anyone can fall apart in the next minute. There's not very much protection between people. Very dynamic, very fast. For this, I think of Vietnam, really. Lots and lots of fast changes. Huge entrepreneurial center. Then we move to green. So the green world is the world of sustainability. This is the world in which people really take care and time to consider what's the impact of what we're doing? What's the impact on the environment? What's the impact on other people? What's the impact on the general world of work? So corporate social responsibility and brand become really important to these organizations because people are going to be attracted to be recruited into them on the basis of their brand. And so, for example, at the moment, we seem to be in a moment where veganism, vegetarianism, and organic are top. So lots of organizations have set up organic options. Recently in the UK, Greggs, the sausage roll makers, made a vegan sausage roll. It was all over the papers. That is what counts because it attracts both customers and employees. And a problem in that area repels customers and employees. And so your brand in this area would become hugely important. For this, I do have to admit, I do think about sort of California, that kind of American area where your brand would be the most important thing that people would wonder about you. And then finally, the yellow sunshine area, where what's most important is your employees. And everything is structured around making things good for your employees. So sunshine, light, bright, And as one of my students said, completely impossible and actually never going to happen. But that's the people area. So these are 4 possible futures, 4 ways that it may be in the future. And as you look at them, which of those do you think it would be more likely for you? Could you put in the chat what you think would be most likely in your opinion? Now I can see why my video, when I click on that, the video for me comes up. Okay, so that was PricewaterhouseCoopers. On the other hand, Deloitte looked at the same question, but they said something very, very different. What they said was, hold on, it's not about these 4 possible endpoints in 2030, but instead it's about the processes that get us to 2030 and understanding what's inside each of those processes. So the first thing that they looked at was the actual work itself. And you can see that's number 1, and they're thinking there about the extent to which work is automated. Now, the kind of teal is the current work options from a couple of years ago, and the green is future work options. So they see this as an area of expansion. And really what they're saying is much work can be automated. So anything routine really is what they identify as possible for automation. So that can be anything from filing taxes, putting files together, accounting analysis, statistical analysis, all your different dashboards that you can have within HR. Ever such a lot of work can be automated. So what can't be automated? Well, mostly it seems to be that things around socializing, things around innovation, and things around intuition currently, not necessarily forever, but currently aren't that effective at being automated. So that was the first area, the work. The second area they talked about was the workforce, the people who are actually doing the work. And so they were talking there about this continuum from, think about the blue world, your safe and secure permanent company worker who's going to be there for their entire career, through to the gig economy and through to crowdsourcing. So imagine you might have a task like, let's say, map out the geography of a particular city. You might have one person work on that for 2 years, or you might give it out to crowdsourcing and get gig workers to do it very, very quickly. Each gig worker will do one small piece, and it will all be put together. So we have this continuum of who can do the work, and there are some important variations in here. So if you've got someone who is this company person, they're in the company forever, the company is kind of responsible for them. They get paid holiday, they get development time, they get paid sick, they get a pension, but they have to do exactly what the company asks them to do. They're within that narrow tower block. Gig workers, on the other hand, only get paid for the time they work. No sick pay, no holiday pay, no expectation of work in the future. But they are free to do what they choose to do. And it's up to them to prepare to do it well, and seek future work. 2 different options. And then finally, where is the work done? And this is one of the really, really interesting areas. And we're experiencing a huge rush of it right now, aren't we? And normally I travel into London 4 times a week to go to the university, and that takes me about an hour and a half each way. So for me, this social isolating at home, I feel so much better because I'm not doing all that traveling. Instead, I'm working from home, and you can see my lovely shed. I am working in my lovely shed. So where is the work done? We can think of work in 2 areas. We have synchronous and asynchronous work. This is synchronous. It's at the same time. You and I are speaking. Well, you're listening, I'm speaking at the same time. but we're not in the same place. You may be anywhere across the world. Time-space distantiation describes asynchronous online, where people can be in various different places and various different time zones. And therefore, the social relations between them are very, very different. And that's a challenge that we're facing head on now. We've had some new people start at the university. How do you induct new employees when there isn't a place to go? You can sit in a room and talk to people on a screen all you like, but is that a proper induction? How does it change the culture? How does it change the way we do things around here? Is there an around here? So, the future of work, these are the processes that really impact the future of work and the way that things will happen. So I want to challenge you really that when we think about the future of work, we're not thinking about, I'm heading over there. We might be able to scope out, it looks a bit like it's going to be this, this, or this, blue, red, yellow, or green in Pricewaterhouse's world. But what Deloitte's are saying is actually it's the processes underneath it, how the work's changing, how the workforce is changing, and how the location of the work is changing. So can you hold on to those thoughts? Because I want to move on to looking at what we think are the drivers and the barriers to the change. So let's think about those boundaries between work and not work, and between different types of work, and between what we think is the employer, range of employers, different stakeholders who have different levels of power, different localities of power, from the people providing the task to the people doing the task. Once you start to take away those barriers, which we found with the blue world, it becomes very complex. So here are some of the drivers and the barriers to change. Okay, so there are a lot of them. And I have picked these out because I think these are the ones that are particularly interesting. It doesn't mean that these are the most important, and it doesn't mean that there aren't others that aren't here that I didn't consider to put on. I didn't want the slides to get too busy. So I think one of the most important moving forward is the one that's top right on the screen. So that is representing scarcity of resources. We are going to have a world in which resources are far more scarce than we can imagine. So when I think about that, there's a start slide. Okay, now, thank you, Camille. Has it gone completely now? Oh, it's because I picked up the pen. Good, so you can see the screen, can you? You can see my slide, because I can't. Oh, Lord. Right, okay. Now it's come back for me. Good. Okay, so we can see the world here. Camille, can you just let me know that you can still see my screen, please? Because I've lost a lot. Okay, oops, gone back one. I didn't want to do that. Okay, here we go. Right, good. Okay, so we were talking about the world being short of resources. North Mexico, California, are in the middle of a significant drought. And when I say significant, what I mean is throughout history, as measured by geological deposits, archaeology, etc., this seems to be the fifth only significant dry period. Masked, they think, by a lot of additional rain in the last 10 years, but really significantly dry. Now think about the population of Mexico and the population of California. It's known as Northwest North America. So that area has San Francisco, has Los Angeles, has a huge, huge population, but also has not enough water for them. So what's that going to do? Will that be a situation where necessity is the mother of invention and suddenly there's a whole load of invention? Will it lead to huge immigration? Will that be a particularly poor area? Is that a driver or is it a barrier to the change in the future workplace? And of course, if you look bottom left, you'll see an image for globalization. So globalization is a huge driver of change. Now, interestingly, the most recent work that's being done on globalization is essentially saying that we are starting to deglobalize. We're starting to become more local, partly in our politics. Across the globe, I'm sure you'll have observed this increase in nationalism. As people tend to start to think more locally instead of globally as a kind of a zeitgeist at the moment. But also some technology is driving deglobalization, in particular 3D printing. So in Dubai, they've started 3D printing houses. You can 3D print anything, almost it appears, and the materials that you need for 3D printing are very, very variable. So therefore, it's easily transferable by geography. And the things that made a huge difference before, such as were you close to resources? So in the very beginning, were you close to water, clean water, and were you close to safety? But now, are you close to different mines? Are you close to a pipe for gas? Are you close to all different sorts of resources? That reduces when something like 3D technology means that you can build your own resources. Okay, also then we need to think about Industry 4.0. So this is the fourth industrial wave, which we are currently in now. But it's fairly early days, so we tend not to perceive it as another industrial revolution. But the classification really of the fourth industrial revolution is a combining of a cyber revolution. So combining people and things. Think about the Internet of Things. You've left your office, you're walking home. Just as you get to the corner shop, your fridge sends you a text reminding you that it's run out of milk. So you go into the corner shop and get some milk. As you come out, you check the temperature of your flat to be sure that your flat's warm enough. You're halfway home, you ping a text to the oven telling it to turn on so that you can have your food ready when you get home. Internet of Things. Your tools, your home, the things you have in your home interact with you and with one another to give you the optimum environment. The other area of technology that's having a huge impact on us is that of health and bioscience. So there are some amazing technological developments that we have that are really changing the way that we do things. So a perfect example of this would be there's a small group in London where on the palm of their hand they've had a chip inserted so that when they go through into London Underground, they just put their hand on the dot and it charges them automatically. Amazing. Also, we've got all sorts of changes in terms of the medical side of things, in terms of repairing our bodies, in terms of being able to go into different environments that are really changing the potential that we have for the future. However, this can only really happen if we can all move together. And if you have a look at the bottom right, you can see the index of income equality, or in fact, income inequality. Dark green, really, really wealthy. Dark red, really, really poor. And you can see that there's some real variation between wealth and poverty of entire populations. And of course, if poverty is dragging people back, then it's very, very hard to be thinking about moving forward in the workplace, taking part in all the innovations to change the future workplace. And have a look at the map. So East Africa, somewhere like Kenya, at the moment has a terrible problem with locusts. There's a locust plague there. So people there, I would imagine, are focusing more on survival rather than focusing on, Industry 4.0 says this. So demographics become incredibly important. And certainly in those dark green areas, those are the areas where the population is particularly an aging population. So in the workplace in Western Europe at the moment, it's the first time we've got 4 generations in the workplace. Last year in Germany, that was the first time that there was a shrinkage of the population, because not due to emigration or immigration or anything like that, but rather because the population wasn't replaced by the birth rate. The birth rate was lower than the death rate. So there is a shrinking, aging population. This has a huge impact for the workplace, because in a world where we have a war for talent, which we do, we additionally have kind of a really exacerbated war for talent, because those older people, they're not being replaced. Their skills aren't being replaced. So we have to work even harder to retain them, which leads us to think about retirement and about agile working. So the image in the middle is of someone working from home. So think about it. In a world where we've got fewer people and the real skills and experience are starting to be concentrated in the older people, what should organizations do? Should we give people sort of part retired, part working? Should we make everyone work part-time? Should we go to agile working, where people can work from home like we're doing now all the time? Is that part of our future? And if that's part of our future, what are the boundaries between me at home and me at work? Right now, we're all experiencing kind of a mixing up of that. My own personal experience is of a work intensification. But for me, that's partly because I'm lucky enough to have a shed in the garden where I can work. For people who are working, I don't know, from their bedroom, from their front room, particularly if they've got children running around, that's a tough call. So each of these may be considered either and or barriers and drivers. And in my opinion, they're some of the key barriers and drivers that are driving the future of the workplace. So it's interesting to think about the expectations that organizations have and how those expectations are changing and are shifting in relation to what's happening in each of these areas. So moving on, I want to focus down now on thinking about the gig economy itself. So what is the gig economy? Well, when we talk about the gig economy, we're really thinking about that part of the economy which is focused on short-term, temporary, very precise and specific contracts for task. So they're contracts for a specific task or a specific set of tasks. And they range really from, I think the shortest task we came across was on Amazon Turk. People can be doing work for about 10 minutes at a time for 30p, 40p, and they're jobs like, when you go online and it says, "Are you a robot?" and you have to look at a picture that's divided up into squares and click to say which are the bus. Well, someone beforehand has gone into that and has ticked which ones are the bus, so that when you do it, it can be verified. That's the shortest. The longest seems to be a repeating monthly contract for some kind of high quality, high value marketing, design, legal workers who then may get repeat work, but continually expect not to. So there are then these two sides to the gig economy. On the one side, if you're someone like a Deliveroo driver, it's hugely precarious. Not only are you relatively unsafe cycling around, but also you have to provide your own bicycle. you have to stump up a lot of upfront costs. You get no pay for sick, for holiday, you get no training or development. There's no possibility of developing into a new role. This is what you do. But on the other hand, it's quite flexible. So if you're perhaps a student, you could do 10 hours with Deliveroo. If you're a parent looking after children, or perhaps as a dependent adult you're looking after, you're a carer for someone, you might be able to get 15 hours working. You know, that could be possible. Particularly, it seems to be helpful for people if they're trying to move into a career at the beginning of their working life or moving out of a career. So this can be a useful option for people to take if you would like to change career or if you would like to move into a new sort of sector. It can enhance flexibility, but on the other hand, it can be enormously precarious and it can lead to significant precarity for people. So with my colleague Elaine Yerby, she and I recently edited a book that came out a couple of weeks ago called Conflict and Shifting Boundaries in the Gig Economy, an Interdisciplinary Analysis. And that's a picture of the front cover. It's produced by Emerald. So if you want to look it up, you will find it under Emerald. And we put together a model of the gig economy. And we call this the dynamic structural model because what we're hoping to do is really describe what we see as the structure of the gig economy and look at how dynamic that structure is. So we see two sides of the gig economy, and we've made one side the center of the circle and one side the outside. So the outside is that part where the gig economy gives you freedom. Let's say you've been working for many years, you can't yet afford to retire, but you don't really want to stay at work. So you take on a part-time gig. It's fixed term for 6 months, it's 2 days a week, and it gives you just what you want in terms of slowly dialing down from full-time work. On the other hand, in the very center is peak precarity. And this is people, I think for me, the worst of all are those people doing the very low skill jobs, sat up in their bedroom, working for hours and hours and hours for very little money and not really having many other options. So those are the two extremes really of the gig economy. And when we were analysing the gig economy, we thought that there were these 5 kind of elements that were really important. So starting at the top, we have the collective. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. Oh, dear. Right, okay, good. Starting at the top again, we've got collective. So collective means the extent to which you are working with other people. So one of the things we found in the gig economy was that trade unions have tended to shy away from it in the past because they work with employees. And if you're in the gig economy, by definition, you are not an employee and therefore not represented by anyone else. Except now there are a couple of new trade unions, in particular the IWGB, who are the Independent Workers of Great Britain and brilliantly represent gig workers. But the extent to which you build social relationship and you use that to mediate whether you're in a more precarious or a less precarious place is very important. A nice example we came across of this was people doing kind of administrative and low-level marketing type gigs had quite a few WhatsApp groups where they would talk about the pay that each platform was giving them, and they would share about where the pay had got a bit worse and where it had got better somewhere else. And they would support one another in moving to a more advantageous platform. So the second area then is reward. Reward is about how much money you get for the bit of the gig that you're doing. So if we look at people like Uber drivers, an Uber driver may consider their reward is fairly reasonable. But when you sit down with them and work out how much time they are waiting and how much they get paid, if you take into account the time waiting for a gig, then the pay is extremely low. So you've got first of all the amount of pay, but then you've got the reliability of pay. Do you have to go and chase for that all the time, or does it come to you pretty automatically? And how reliable is the pay? Can you really trust those people to pay, or does it cause you a lot of anxiety that you may or may not get your reward? The next one then is the place. And we talked about place a little bit earlier on. So place in terms of where do you do your work? Are you like an Uber driver or a Deliveroo person or a Just Eat person? You have to go to there in order to do the work. Can you do it from your own home? Do you have to go to an office? What's the place and what protection does that give you? Next is your tenure. How long is this gig for? As I said, the quickest one we came across really was 30 minutes, and the longest one was about a year, really. So how long have you got this gig for? And then finally, trust. To what extent are you trusted in your work? Now, we did some text analysis on what the gig economy platforms say about themselves, and what we found was 73% of the platforms. So we found every platform we could within about 2.5 weeks. I think we got 95 platforms, and of them, 73% of them were American and Californian and from San Francisco. So the gig economy has 1.3 million people just in the UK. Pretty much all of them managed directly from San Francisco, and the management is normally via a playbook. So there's a set of rules and regulations with scripts and with a clear outline of what you should do in different situations that's sent out. So local managers have very, very little opportunity to change the way that they manage people according to local custom and practice, and instead must do it appears, according to the San Francisco way of doing things, which may or may not fit. So management by algorithm is happening an awful lot, and people have very little freedom. Now, you may have more freedom to do the work the way you think it should be done, and you may have less, and that's what trust is all about. So each of those mediate between this kind of flexibility, lifestyle freedom, and precarity. And then the secondary mediators we found within that are identity, voice, and agency. So agency, to what extent do you have agency or do you have freedom to choose? Are you someone who is highly skilled and has a few people you could go to, or actually do you have to take what you can get? So what's your agency? What's your freedom? Then what's your identity? Who are you? Why are you doing this? What does this mean to you? Are you doing this because, for example, the IWGB found that an awful lot of gigs are really done by ethnicity? So, for example, in London, medical couriers are almost entirely immigrants from Sudan. Presumably, they're choosing the job not because, or the task, not because they always wanted to be medical couriers, but because their friends are also medical couriers, and so they did the job because their identity is with their family and their friends rather than with the job. So what's your identity? If your identity is someone who oh, you get an awful lot of gigging academics now, so are you someone who really wants to be an academic and you see it as a way into the academic world? What's your identity? And then finally, what's your voice? Can you make your voice heard? Is this something that you can make loud for people and change things for yourself? That is especially important. So that's the dynamic structural model of the gig economy. And the reason I say voice is so important is because of this film. Now, this is a really, really good film about what happened for one family. This is a true story. The father was a gigger, and it's really about what happened. I hope you can use this link. If not, it's called Sorry We Missed You. It has been available for free for some of the time. Give yourself time to sit and watch it. It's quite a moving film. but it is a very interesting film, and it shows why the importance of voice and identity and agency are so important in mediating those other structural elements to enable people to move away from the very, very precarious parts of the gig economy. I think it also shows how people can end up being quite trapped. Because what you have, if you think about the issue of boundaries and expectations, what you end up having is organizations that don't really have a boundary. People are in it and out of it, and therefore expectations to be treated well, to be in some way cared for, are completely ignored. And the organization does not have to have those expectations of itself, and also doesn't have to have expectations of those individuals of the way it should treat them. So I'd recommend that you have a look at this. And then the final area, if we think about boundaries and we think about the workplace, within HRM, normally, think about the blue world, we're normally all about succession planning and talent management and performance management. But actually, if what we're doing is taking on giggers for a week, 2 weeks for specific tasks, is HR much more than supply chain manager? And when you do have giggers coming in and doing work and developing tacit knowledge, how can organizations retain that knowledge? So thinking about the boundary, normally intellectual property and knowledge is quite a solid entitative boundary around an organization. But actually in this situation, the knowledge is in the gigger's head, and they might be going to your competitor next week and another competitor the week after. So how are you going to retain the knowledge between the different contracts? And then finally, one of the risks that individuals might experience is now there are new app-based companies coming up who want to manage the talent of giggers, and they will offer different development options, but only against their benefit, not for the benefit of the individual gigger. So there are some real boundary issues for individuals as giggers and organizations. Okay, so we've just got a few minutes left, and as we move to finish, I'd like to think about what has happened with the coronavirus pandemic and how has this impacted everything. And I think it's such a huge change, and we have sort of almost got used to it, you know. I was looking at a picture on my phone. It was about 2 months ago. Had a speaker come to talk for the MBA. He did a really good job. And afterwards, we all took a selfie as a group. There were about 80 of us there, I think it was. And I was looking at this selfie and I found myself being really shocked. I thought, oh, they were standing so close, that's really wrong. And then I sort of stood back and thought, well, no, it's only now that it's wrong. But it's already changed my thinking and changed the way that I'm seeing things. So what impact has the coronavirus had on us? Well, the thing that McGowan has identified is that it seems to have accelerated our digital transformations. Certainly, that's what we experience at the university. Since the coronavirus, since we had to do social distancing, we have upped our use of digital incredibly. Lecturers have been amazing. The lecturers who are going to be teaching face-to-face, suddenly they're teaching online. We're training everyone up in how to design for online. Very quickly, we're changing so much. And it's been a real accelerator. Now, the interesting thing I think about that is that the digital is easy to measure, isn't it? It's very easy to say how many hours are people staying online, how duff is the broadband because people are using it too much, so we can measure how much additional we need to put in. But it also, I think, accelerates other areas very much. So one of the other areas that it really accelerates then is in terms of our agile working. So agile and flexible working are related, but they are different as well. Flexible working is the part that we normally experience. And flexible working normally is, you might say to your line manager, my children need picking up at 5 o'clock from school, so I need to finish at 4:30. Your manager will let you start at 8:30 and finish at 4:30. Or maybe you can work from home one day a week. Or maybe you have core hours. You know, lots of different ways of doing flexible working. Agile working is different. Agile working says we're going to work the way that's best for the task. So, for example, about 18 months ago, I was working on designing a role play with someone. She had small children. She couldn't travel easily. And in order to maximize the time we could spend on design together, we both met in a Wetherspoons near her home. It's great to work in. Free tea and coffee all day, essentially, and we sat there and we worked all day. It was only 2 minutes from her school, so we had as much of the day as we could. So what we focused on was achievement of the task. So agile working is this business mindset. So it's a way of doing business that focuses on the best way to do the task. It's also about being highly responsive and being very quick in your response. And part of me, this is my personal thought, rather than being any research-based thought, is that organizations have now seen how quickly we can do things. So they've seen that we can very quickly work from home, very quickly teach online, very quickly everyone's working extremely hard to keep things going. And therefore they're likely to expect that in the future. So I think that this coronavirus has really kind of impelled this agile working far more. So what we were going to do today was think about what is the direction of travel in terms of the future of the workplace. What does it look like? And think about the boundaries between all those 4 different areas of work. We're thinking about what have been the drivers and the barriers to change. And I've put some up, and I'm certain that you will be thinking, but you didn't include this and you didn't include that. And I disagree with what you say about this. And that really relates back to what we call the VUCA world. So we live in a world which is VUCA. Okay, so it's uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous, and it's volatile. And all of those things mean that it's very, very hard to kind of put your arms around it and really understand what's going on. We talked a bit about the gig economy in relation to that, and particularly in relation to this very interesting issue of boundaries between individual and work and organizations, and how those get mediated, and the different expectations that we can have one to the other. And then we finished off by looking at the coronavirus and the impact of the coronavirus. So thank you ever so much for coming along and listening to this webinar. Good luck for all of you. I would just like to say it's really great to be speaking to alumni from East London. And I'm going to try and go back to my camera now. So if you have any questions, please let me know, and please put them in the there you go. I can see camera. I hope you can see camera too. Please put any questions or chat in the question and chat area. Okay, so I'm not sure if it takes a while for questions to come up. And I can't see any chat. Good. Scroll down. Thank you, Camille. There are questions. Okay. Now, Camille, you're asking me to open in full mode, but I can't. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Yes, I will send Camille a copy of my presentation, definitely. Thank you, Sadaf, really appreciate that. Thank you, Christopher. Oh no, online learning UEL. So what we have now at UEL is the Centre of Excellence for Learning and Teaching, and they were really great. The name of the film is While You Were Out, because the person delivers parcels. So it's what happens while you were out. And I promise you, it's really moving. Really is moving. Yeah. So what the name of the film was While You Were Out. Okay, good. I've only got a tiny little way of seeing the okay. Good. Okay, I think that's all the questions. Brilliant. Thanks, Camille. Okay, thank you ever so much, everyone. It's been really brilliant to meet with you. Take care. Good luck. And it's fantastic to be in touch with the alumni. Take care. God bless everyone. Bye. Thank you. God bless.